Hello and welcome to another tactical preview. Sorry about that little technical error. That was me muting myself, just so you don't catch me speaking in the background. I'm joined by myself. I'm hosting, which is Stu. I'm joined by Abdel, and I'm also joined by a goalkeeping expert today, John. So quick hello to both of you. Hi, Abdel. How you doing? How's Canada?
Hey, guys. Canada is good. Summer is nice. Finally.
Excellent. And John, first time on the show with myself, so good to meet you. How are you?
Lovely to meet you too. Yeah, doing great.
All right. So look, the tactical preview was, most of our viewers know, we try and delve down in certain aspects of how the team plays, on how we think it should play on occasions as opposed to how it has done. And one of the areas that myself and Abdel have been critical about in recent times is our goalkeeping situation. And so I'm delighted that John can join us. So, John, just to give you a brief, really, as a centre-half, an ex-centre-half, I'm always looking for my goalkeeper to be proactive and reactive. Back in the day when De Gea first joined us and his shirts were hanging off him, he was 9 stone wringing wet, if you remember. He was easily targeted from crosses and heavy centre forwards. His game changed slightly. He became this brilliant shot stopper that we see today. But he ventured off his line more than what he has done recently. So from a goalkeeping point of view, can you just give us a brief on how you've seen De Gea come through the ranks at Manchester United, and then what you would like to see from him moving forward?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely spot on. He started off physically not built how he would want to be, but obviously he was only a 20-year-old lad when he signed. And then he sort of bulked up and got a bit more streetwise as the years went on, and finally got to show the sort of shot stopping levels he was expected of. Because I think I remember those early years there were some great saves, but there were also lots of mistakes scattered around. And I think by about 2015, 16, 17, then he sort of reached his peak with United, and it seemed like there wasn't really many mistakes, and his shot stopping was on another level. And then I think you're right in noticing sort of since 2017-18, so sort of the last 4 or 5 years, it looks like what's happened is he's sort of been happy to just save the shots and doesn't really want to get involved in either build up or coming for crosses or sweeping up. And he's sort of got in his comfort zone a little bit. And the awkward thing is, his profile was probably good enough to be the best keeper in the world 10, 20 years ago. But right now, where things are going, actually, there are keepers that are far worse shot stoppers than De Gea that are actually contributing more positively to their team. The likes of Mendy, Alisson, Ederson are not De Gea's level at shot stopper, but they add so much more to Man City, Man City, Liverpool and Chelsea because of the other things they can add.
So as a goalkeeper, have you got any idea why a goalkeeper can regress like he's done? Again, not with his shot-stopping ability, but his overall ability as a goalkeeper. Why he would suddenly elect not to come for a cross, why he would suddenly elect not to face a one-on-one down 9 to 12 yards out rather than 2 yards out.
So I think a lot of it is De Gea he was never the world's greatest at coming for crosses or sweeping up or whatever. But to me, it seems from seeing the sort of stuff I see in the media, it looks like it's he doesn't really want to do that. He's not comfortable doing it. And as a goalkeeper, one of the things is when you go onto the pitch, it's sort of autopilot. So you do all your work in training, you try and improve, you try and work on new footwork patterns, new tactics, maybe starting a little bit higher, starting a little bit deeper, whatever it might be. But once you're in a game, it's just autopilot that takes over. You don't want to second guess. Because if you're second guessing, you've already lost that millisecond and you've probably conceded the goal, missed the cross, done whatever. So it feels like, to me, he can't be being pushed in training to do these things, because whenever he seems to be going back into autopilot, his autopilot is very protect the goal first. And like, if you look through the sort of the FA materials on this, they sort of talk about defending the goal, which is your shot-stopping actions, you stay in the goal frame. Then there's defending the area, which is you're coming for crosses, you're claiming in and around the box. And then there's defending the space. So that's making sure if the ball does go over Maguire's head, Varane's head, I can sweep up. And it feels like De Gea prioritizes defending the goal over everything. Like, he will not think about defending the space or defending the area. He will only think about defending the goal.
I'm so glad you brought that up because Abdel, I tell you, I'm like a broken record when it comes about the spacing behind the centre half and the goalkeeper. Abdel, do you want to just elaborate on what we discuss about that? Because, like I say, I'm like a broken record about it. All the time I talk about the spacing behind, and I've cited a variety of different goals.
Yeah. The thing I can elaborate in the sense of like when we bought Maguire, we bought him because of his physicality and his aerial prowess in general. Also his ball playing ability, but that's another topic. And what you would think about is like, okay, so we got a center half who can win most of the duels. If we have a goalkeeper that comes out for the crosses, then you're eliminating, I'm not saying 99% of the threats, but like majority of the threats. Now, like it would take a really well worked out corner routine to beat you, And the thing is, yes, we got like Maguire in 1920, 2021, 2022, his season wasn't good. But in those first two seasons, we were winning a lot of headers. We were cleaning a lot of things, but still we were conceding a lot of corners. And when you think about it, it's just that our goalkeeper barely comes out. Like whenever Maguire gets beaten, there's no one else after him to try and win that header. Now, this is where you, like you were saying, you would, require a goalkeeper to come out. I'm not saying he can come out for everything because some corner routines are farther away from the goalkeeper. He won't have time to reach it and claim it. But like, especially those within the 6-yard box, that space in front of the goal, the goal that we're talking about. And he doesn't come out for it at all. So for other teams, there's an advantage, and it's harder for them to concede from set pieces. For us, even though we have center backs who can win headers a lot, more frequently at least, or on the same level as the rest of the Premier League, we're still conceding far more, set pieces than we should be conceding.
So that kind of leads me on to a question. Do you think we've got the wrong profile of centre halves then, or the right profile of centre halves that marry De Gea, not just a goalkeeper? Because that's quite important, isn't it? Again, from from playing as a centre half, I'm used to a goalkeeper coming out and cleaning me out as well as the football. But that is old school type of football. I understand how football has changed.
Yeah.
And I understand the necessity to be able to work the ball with your feet more and be less commanding maybe in that type of area. So do you think our centre halves kind of suit De Gea's profile? And this is to both of you, so please, both of you bounce off it.
You want me to go first or?
Whichever, I don't mind. It's.
I think it depends on how your team wants to play in general, right? Like if you're a team, let's say that only plays a low block where your team does not really move away from your penalty box that far, then having a De Gea and a Maguire that wins a lot of headers is good in general. It's not bad. But the thing is, we're a team that wants to move away from the penalty box a lot further high, and for a keeper that prefers to be on the line, then that's a mismatch in profile, because you're basically saying, I want a keeper that can do actions away from the 6-yard box, but I'm sticking with a keeper that doesn't do that. So that's the mismatch that happened. I don't think the mismatch is between the center back and the goalkeeper. The mismatch is between the style and the goalkeeper. And yeah, I think the biggest mismatch would be Maguire, Lindelof, Varane, whoever. They're good on the ball, but the first link, or the one that's between the two center backs, is not good on the ball. So you're kind of breaking that chain at the very start, from the very beginning. So it's a mismatch in just the style, more than the players themselves. Obviously, the players they don't play well because he's bad on the ball and they're good, but it's more to do with the style than anything else.
What do you think about that, John?
Yep, no, I completely agree. In terms of, I think it's a weird one. Buying Maguire, who's basically the only real big weakness in his game is he's going to be his pace. And England get around this by having Kyle Walker next to him, so Kyle Walker just covers everything, so it's fine. But having that, if you can't keep Varane fit, who's obviously got the pace, and you've got Lindelof with him, you need a keeper who sweeps. I think that's why United's record got so much better when Henderson came in. Like, Henderson's not anywhere near De Gea at shot stopping, right?
No, but we agree.
But the amount of actions he performed sweeping, like, I think there was some crazy stat, like, he performed as many actions sweeping in the Tottenham game as De Gea did in like the previous 15 games combined or something that he played. Yeah. So it was like, but just allowing that, suddenly Maguire's way more confident, Lindelof's more confident, because they know if it goes over my head, it's going to be swept up. I don't have to run back towards goal, because like Maguire, that's the one thing he doesn't want to do. He can win all the headers for you. He can play through teams. He can dribble out. He can do what you like, stand up a striker. But if the striker goes past him and they're running in behind, Maguire's really in trouble. So yeah exactly what was said before. Like, it's the mismatch between the two player profiles, as in the team style. Like, Maguire could play if there was a goalkeeper who wanted to come out behind him.
Like, I think if we were playing a low block for 38 games, then Maguire and De Gea playing together isn't a big problem, because the one requirement that there are a mismatch in, they wouldn't be using anyway, which is the ball distribution. But if the style was different and adding Maguire and De Gea together, then you're not only having a mismatch in style, you have a mismatch in profiles. But the bigger one is the style, because you could have accommodated them a little bit if you changed your style, right? But like John was saying, also because Maguire is of his pace and his agility, he can get spin by a pacey forward, right? But if you have a goalkeeper that can sweep up and clean up after you, or you have a partner that can has a recovery pace, then Maguire, that weakness of Maguire's isn't a problem. The problem is that not only we're fit, like putting a profile that's not good as in a goalkeeper, we're not really covering for Maguire's weakness in his partner as well. Or we tried with Varane, but Varane isn't consistent in playing as well. So yeah.
No, I tend to agree. I mean, as you know, Abdel, I've often argued that the travelling distance is way too deep between our centre-halves and our goalkeeper. So coming back to what we were saying about not only style of play and different types of profile, do you think Maguire's game has suffered? And I'm going to use Maguire because he's obviously been the linchpin for all the criticism that's aimed at our defensive frailties. And it's very difficult for a player to have to readapt his game to accommodate a goalkeeper. And our fan base hasn't quite caught on to that yet. They look at it and say, well, De Gea saved us in X, Y, and Z games. Forget that he's there to do that. They just say, well, he's player of the year. So, so he's been absolutely brilliant. But they're not necessarily understanding. And we've tried to explain this, John, on many occasions, how the ball rotates directly to De Gea and how sometimes Maguire is completely pulled out. Not only by the fullbacks being out of position, but by De Gea by default being out of position. So do you think Maguire's overall game has suffered?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think going back to that point, it is very hard that you first made. It's very hard to see. So De Gea in my models and the work I've done, like his shot stopping saved United like 10 goals last season. Like it was a really good season. And it's quite easy for a fan to see that, right? He pulls one out of the top corner at Newcastle, he pulls one out of the top corner at Leicester. Really easy for a fan to see that and be like, what a save. The problem is, when you look at the other parts of the models, so I have a model that looks at every cross that comes in the box, how likely an average keeper would claim it. And if they don't claim it, how likely is it to result in a goal? So if a keeper doesn't come for a cross and it's a 3-yard out header, that's going to be a goal like 70% of the time. So if they don't claim it, it's a big issue. And so when you look at that and add that into the model, I have De Gea in his cross-claiming costing Man United 5 goals. So the opposition have like 5 goals worth of extra shots. So suddenly this 10 number of how good his shot stopping is reduced it by half, because he's saving a lot of close range headers or conceding a lot of close range headers that other keepers just wouldn't even face. And then that's, if you add sweeping on top of that, that just takes into account all the through balls he's faced. How likely would an average keeper sweep them up and stop a shot from ever happening? And De Gea is about -1 goal, -2 goals worse than the average. So now you can see that 10 numbers getting whittled down even further. And then when we take distribution into account, basically every time De Gea gets the ball, how likely is he to set up a Man United goal versus give it away and set up an opposition goal? He's again about a goal worse than the average Premier League keeper. So when we've whittled all this down, he ends up only +3. But I think the problem is for Man United fans, it's really hard. It's easy to see the +10, But the other negatives, because they're actions that don't happen, so they're good passes he doesn't make, or they're crosses he doesn't claim, or through balls he doesn't sweep up, it's really hard to see. But I think that's where the sort of advanced statistical modelling can come in and take care of these actions that we can't see. And then suddenly it might help people realise that while Ederson was a bang average shot stopper last year, his other contributions meant he was worth more than 3 goals to Man City. So it's one of those things. De Gea's in this weird position where he'll get voted player of the year by peers and other people because they can't see the things he doesn't do. And yeah, indeed, going back to the original question, it is going to harm Maguire, because if he's thinking a cross comes over his head and he's thinking De Gea's not coming, he's suddenly starting deeper and starting in a position he doesn't like. And if there's a through ball happening, he's already setting off running towards his goal rather than playing offside because he's worried. And similarly on the ball, he turns and he doesn't want to pass back to De Gea. And for people who think this isn't a big issue, just look at Arsenal when they went from Leno to Ramsdale. So Leno's not even that bad on the ball. He's not comfortable on the ball, but he's not awful. Then Arsenal brought in Ramsdale, who really likes being on the ball and can play. And suddenly there's like Arsenal scoring like 20 pass goals from the goalkeeper again, like they used to back in the day. So for people who don't realise how big difference it can make, if De Gea gets replaced with a ball-playing goalkeeper, it isn't just, oh, that affects like a tiny amount of things during the game. That actually can affect everything, because suddenly Maguire and Lindelof or Varane or whoever's playing can start higher. And then if they do get pressed, they can turn around and play it back, knowing the goalkeeper won't just shell it out for a throw-in or kick it to their striker. It's a sort of psychological aspect that I think it's really hard to quantize with the numbers, except if you take into account what I've tried to do with my models of all the actions a goalkeeper could possibly do, and then what did they choose.
Thank you so much for saying that. Thank
Yeah,
you. I have tried so much to explain this on Twitter, and all I get is just you don't know what you're talking about, and you know how Twitter reacts. But what I wanted to add to what you said, though, 2 things. The first one is, on his positive side for the shot stopping, also the volume of chances that Man United concede helps him a lot. So he might not even be having a super shot stopping season, but because Man United are giving him that much that he work, that by just the law of averages, he is saving more than any ordinary goalkeeper should be saving. So even let's say for an example's sake, and I'm not saying these numbers are true, but let's say Man United is conceding 5 chances per game, right? And the average Premier League team is conceding, let's say, 2.5. So that's double already that we were conceding. Especially last season, it was a horrible season for Manchester United, and they were conceding a lot. So just by those numbers, the fact that you're conceding double the amount of chances, De Gea has worked twice as much as any ordinary goalkeeper. So if he's worked twice as much as any goalkeeper, he's bound to be saving a lot more than any ordinary goalkeeper saving. So it's not even that his shot stopping is super out of the world. It's just that he's working a lot more than any ordinary goalkeeper is working. And especially if you just compare it to the top teams, then that comparison becomes even bigger. Because Ederson is not working that much, Alisson is not working that much, but when they do have to work, they have these other qualities that supersede De Gea a lot more than his shot stopping. So that's one. And the second thing, something that John said very early in the conversation, he said, when the players go out on the field, they go into autopilot mode. And that's what I was referring to by habits earlier on in my conversations with you, Stu, when we talked about attackers, when we talked about midfielders. I think it's the same thing is true for goalkeepers as well. You might be trying to change certain habits in your training, and there's 2-3 hours of training you have with your teammates. But the moment you go out on the field and it's a high pressure time and you have to react in milliseconds, what you've been used to doing for years and years and years of your life will always kick in. Will always kick in. So that's why I talk about how difficult it is for coaches to change habits in players. So they try to work around them or use those habits in their advantage. So when we talked about tracking back and not tracking back and receiving under pressure and all that stuff. For goalkeepers, I think it's the same stuff. And when we talk about, De Gea can change, he can become more active, I think also there's a psychological aspect that when I look at De Gea, especially in 1v1 situations, I think because even though he did, bulk a little bit over the years, he's still weak physically, that he actually gets scared of confronting attackers head on. Like I remember there was one time where, I think it's a Liverpool game, and a 1v1 with Salah, Mohamed Salah, and then he kind of like he did his pose for like trying to make himself bigger, but he didn't actually go full on. He like just before Salah released the ball, he shrunk a little bit, like he kind of got scared, and that opened the space for Salah to release the shot just past him.
Yeah, so coming in on 1v1s, that is definitely a thing that I've seen with De Gea over the years. So something really interesting is, so I've built a full 1v1 model that looks at like thousands and thousands of 1v1s and how likely are to go in, basically, and how likely an average keeper is to save them using various techniques. And one thing with De Gea is in 2017-18, he was like unbelievable, really good out of this world, really good at close range 1v1s. And then ever since, he's just dropped off. And one of the reasons here is exactly what Abdul was saying, which is that when he comes out and gets himself into a block position, he then ends up twisting his body away. So prime examples are the Red Bull Leipzig game, the one against Everton, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, the one against Burnley this year, then the one against Salah, as was said. He basically, instead of, as you would be taught to, stay square to the ball, so shoulders square, get yourself into the block position and keep your head up, he will turn his head and twist his body, and then suddenly you can see, like, I'm this wide now, and then when I turn my body, I basically half my width. And then the idea of a close range 1v1 is to, what goalkeepers call, form a premeditated barrier. So the reason you rush out is because you have no reaction time. You can't react to the ball. So what you need to do is make yourself so big it just hits you. I hate when commentators say, oh, it's a good save, but it just hit him. No, that's how you save a one-on-one. You can't react in time when someone's 10 yards away. What you have to do is make yourself big, make yourself block most of the goal. And if it hits your forearm, if it hits your chest, perfect. But the skill is keeping square. And De Gea he used to be really quite good at it. Like I remember one Liverpool game, I think maybe it was like 2014, when Liverpool had like Balotelli and stuff and Ricky Lambert. He must have saved 4 or 5 one-on-ones, and Sterling, they had Sterling as well. And because he just stayed big, kept himself square, and it was just hitting his chest, hitting his legs. And for some reason, initially, I put it down to, I think I wrote an article in 2018 saying what's happened to De Gea one-on-one because he's just dropped off. And I wrote an article basically saying it looks like he doesn't want to get injured because he hasn't got his contract yet. But then he's got his contract now. I thought it was an injury thing. I thought he didn't want to go in and stay square because he was worried about getting injured and then not getting the big contract. But then he got the big contract. So I don't know what's really happened. And De Gea is a weird one-on-one because he's so good at what I call long-range 1v1s, which is where the ball's like far out and they're dribbling in. So think against like Brentford, I think he made some worldies in this way, against Southampton as well, and against Crystal Palace, where he just holds his line. He stays in his 6-yard box. I don't care that you're one-on-one, you're still 18 yards out, beat me. And inevitably they can't because his reactions are so good. But his issue is those close-range ones, he either still stays on his line, like I think he did against City and Liverpool. I think there was some ones where he just stayed in his line and tried to react. The Keita one, and it
didn't come out.
And it just went past him. And then when he does come out, he doesn't come out with enough sort of force or energy or like bravery, I guess, to stay square to the ball. His like blocks and spreads. It doesn't look like his belief. Like when you watch goalkeepers like Neuer or like Alisson, when they or even like Kasper Schmeichel, like when they come out, they are absolutely throwing themselves and like they believe it's going to hit their chest. They believe it's going to hit their face. They believe it's going to hit their arm and it's going to go.
And I think there's an element of like, if it's not going to hit you, throw the attacker off so that he doesn't fully, shoot it with full technique. Like he will misshoot it. It will not be accurate at least. And like John was saying, like some goalkeepers literally throw themselves out. Like I've seen Aaron Ramsdale. Like I thought he was gonna eat the attacker at one point. It's but De Gea, like I've noticed it over the last season, at least, especially last season, because he was getting praised a lot. Like he would shrink in those 1v1s. Like maybe I don't want us to be exaggerating him so much, but like maybe like not fully to the side, but like he just shrinks a little bit. You know what I mean? It's just like gives a little bit to his side. Like he's worried about clashing with the attacker.
It's the fine margins.
Yeah.
He does. I mean, we had one of the best exponents ever at staying big, and that was Peter Schmeichel, one of the greatest exponents of it. I mean, he almost invented the square on type, weird, robotic kind of style. But he was that big; it was very, very difficult to get around him. What most attackers are doing now is they're identifying who's between the posts, and they're identifying what they've got to do to be able to get one over the goalkeeper. So when you're approaching Ramsdale, you've got to take an early shot and hope you can guide it past him. When you're approaching Schmeichel, providing you get him behind the centre half, De Gea, providing you get him in behind the centre halves, you've got that travelling distance. And we're too slow at covering because De Gea doesn't come off the line to, maybe control the environment.
Yeah,
it doesn't allow our fullbacks onto the goal line to give the striker more of an issue, and that basically happened against Burnley, with Rodriguez.
It happened against Aston Villa in preseason.
Villa, yeah.
It's like he's easy to bully, I guess, or he tries to use that as an excuse to scream for a foul. I noticed sometimes he do that. Like if someone tried to push him or get in his way, obstruct his way a little bit, he'll just completely stop and say like someone tried to, do something to me. And like this is probably more of the character, and I can't judge his character just from a TV screen. But like I feel like now he's more of a complainer than actually a person who's trying to find a solution to the to the issues. Like he would always throw it at his, like, what are you guys are doing? I'm like, mate, like you didn't claim a cross. It was an easy cross for you,
Leads me to a good segue, Abdul. That does. And again, a question to you both. You're Eric Ten Hag then. You know the type of goalkeeper you've got. Brilliant shot stopper, but very weak in other areas. You know the defence that you've got. Well, the centre halves that you have, you're not really showing your pairing yet. You bring in Martinez. How are you reconstructing then what I call the back three? It's actually two centre halves and your goalkeeper. Forget the fullbacks now. Forget your CDM. How are you guys reconstructing that so that these three play together how they should play together? And if so, what kind of personnel profile would you say would match? I know it probably comes back to a question we spoke about earlier, and you guys talked about style. So now we understand style. We can now go to player profile because we've got Martinez coming in, we've got Varane, we've got Lindelof, and we've got Maguire. Let's forget Bailly at the minute because I think he'll move on. So out of that conundrum of players then, what do you think is our ideal, and what do you think Ten Hag's thinking about? Either one of you take that.
Well, I imagine given the fees that are touted, it's going to be Martinez and Maguire as the centre halves. I think one thing I'd need is maybe, I know we were trying to avoid talking about the fullbacks, but just because Pickford isn't the most active sweeper in the world. He's not De Gea's level. Like he's basically bang average Premier League at crosses and sweeping. So he's not De Gea, who's like minus 4 goals in crossing and minus 1-2 goals in sweeping. But he's not Edison or Alisson. And the way England managed to get around it is by having quick fullbacks that can cover the centre halves. So I think it's one of those things. If we do have these deficiencies in Maguire that we sort of need to cover up and play to the strengths, I think one way to do that is by having fullbacks with pace that can cover. But that's without the ball. But with the ball, I think it can be done with De Gea, but just with strategy. I think they need to make sure when they are using him for passing back that the pressure is in such a way where De Gea can play the long passes into the sort of fullback, because De Gea is not actually that bad at the sort of clipped ball into the fullback or the winger. When he struggles is if he feels flustered, he'll just ping it out. He won't try and play those. The balls Edison and like Ramsdale and Alisson play sort of between the two strikers coming into the holding midfielder. Like I don't think I've ever seen De Gea play that pass, and I don't think he'll want to play that pass. So you can't
it's only
build
the
up
clip
like
one
City.
that you talked about.
Yeah, so you can't build up like City. You just can't, not with him. But what you can do is you can play, the sort of goal kicks where you have your centre-backs in the box and pass it to Maguire and let Maguire play that pass, because Maguire will play that pass and Martinez can play that pass as well. So you just have to sort of change the roles. So in Man City, Ederson can do both roles. He can take a back pass under pressure and play the clip. He can take a back pass under pressure and play through. For Man United, you're going to need to sort of move the roles around. So Maguire has to do some of it. De Gea can do some of the other parts. And you've got to allow it. And you've got to make a lot of it does also come from the midfield. They've got to allow Maguire and Lindelof or Martinez or whoever it is to start deep and then play through. Because if the midfield stay really high, and that means the defence can't be on De Gea's toes, then De Gea has to do the playing and it becomes an issue. So I think it's sort of trying to get the round pegs in the round holes and the square pegs in the square holes and who can play what pass and make sure they're playing those passes.
Abdul?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think Ten Hag is already trying to mitigate that by having Maguire and Lindelof in preseason closer to De Gea when starting out from the back, so he doesn't have to make any difficult passes or passes under pressure. The only issue is it invites the press so high up, so any mistake would be an automatic, not an open goal chance, but a very big chance. But the advantage is that because you drawn the team against you so high up, you have a lot of space to hit over there, like on the back for their back line. And I think one of the goals against Crystal Palace in preseason highlighted that greatly. It was Lindelof, De Gea, Maguire, and they were all almost very close together, just a couple of yards. And De Gea played the pass to Lindelof, and then there were three people ready to jump in. And then because Fred was trying to shift to make himself available, for Lindelof's pass, Lindelof panicked a little bit until Fred made himself available, and then he was able to play it through. But by the time it reached Fred had a man on him. He had to play it so fast to reach the winger on the other side. And this is where you see how risky it is, especially with people that are not 100% comfortable under pressure, or at least, on the ball. So the weak link here becomes De Gea, and then you have Fred. That diamond that Ten Hag likes to make between the goalkeeper, the two center backs, and the defensive midfielder is very shaky, just because the tip of both sides are weak on the ball. So even though Lindelof is someone who's comfortable on the ball, he panicked because he saw no options, he saw no way out, right? Until Fred became available. But again, it's stemming from they're having to be closer to David De Gea, and Lindelof had the goal gaping right behind him. So if he makes a mistake, that's a goal, automatic, 100%. So that's and these, you're playing with fire basically when you're trying to play with De Gea and someone in the middle who are not comfortable on the ball. And I guess he just kind of have to. And if we don't get one, he's gonna have to automate it somehow, in the sense of when the ball is played left, you go right. When the ball is played right, you go left, and very rigid, automated way, so that those who are not comfortable on the ball will have at least some time and space to be able to play the ball back.
So I tend to agree with you about the sweeping element of playing two at the back. So playing devil's advocate, would there be a case for Ten Hag to maybe go with three at the back and play Martinez as a sweeper, Maguire and Lindelof, or Maguire and Varane? Is there an option for that, would you say? Or
I think personally, it's being flexible is always a great strength. If you can switch to a three at the back when certain teams are causing you problems, and then basically changes the space out wide and changes how the middle of the pitch works, I think that's always useful. So I think maybe last season, it's a bit with Man United. Sometimes it felt like they were too inflexible of the way they wanted to play, and then other times it was no one knows how they want to play. It was sort of a mix between the two, because sometimes it's fine if you're inflexible, if you're Burnley, or I think Stoke or Birmingham City a few years ago. They just played 4-4-2. They knew exactly how they were playing, and that was their strength. Everyone knew their job. And on the other end, if you're really flexible, like Man City or England in recent years, or other teams like that, and you can just change formation all the time and go to 3, go to 4, change it to a diamond in the middle, change it to a flat 2 and a 1. That can be a big strength. And it felt like Man United last year sort of got in between the two. They had no sort of set idea of what they were doing, so they weren't at one end, but at the same time, they weren't even flexible to change things at the other. So I think, flexibility is key, but Erik Ten Hag probably doesn't want to get drawn into constantly changing formation and not really knowing a philosophy of how they're going to build up and play.
No, I agree with that. And the reason I asked that is, Martinez will make a great sweeper. Yeah, I know he's a left-footed centre-half, so to speak, in CDM. Yeah. But what I think it would do, it would enable Maguire to play his more natural game, and it would enable Varane to play his more natural game. There was parts of Varane's Real Madrid career where there was 3 of them. There was a Pepe, there was a Ramos, and there was a Varane. Now, Varane's never been that aggressive type of centre half. Martinez is quite aggressive. Maguire, he likes a fight now and again, but he's brilliant in the air. So you've got 3 different types of player, haven't you, that could maybe help De Gea. But as Aldel is now about to tell me, because he's got it, I can see it in his face, the limitations that gives the rest of the side if you do go with the 3. And I think that's what you're alluding to as well, John. So
I wouldn't say limitations. Like I mentioned in my latest article, the way how our build-up is still shaky, and we'd need to change our midfield. I didn't even stress on De Gea that much, but I stressed on the midfield, and that's because Erik Ten Hag's teams, when they build up, not necessarily from the goal kick, but because not all teams press you, and especially in the Premier League, there is quite a few teams that don't press. They just, go back into their shell, their 4-4-2 or 4-5-1, and just deep block you and try to shut you out. That's it. He does build up by dropping either a fullback beside the center backs, or dropping a midfielder in between the center backs. And I think that will highly depend on Frankie de Jong's deal coming in or not. The Frankie de Jong deal will change a lot of things at United, because it will provide a lot of solutions from building up to progression. So that could be a solution in itself, and you can stay one more season with De Gea until you find a more comfortable keeper on the ball. So in that sense, he does play 3 at the back, in that the shape of the team changes when they're in possession, and so I don't think he needs 3 center backs present at the same time, and especially because Martinez is aggressive, like you were saying, and Maguire is aggressive, and because Ten Hag also, in his style, he relies on counter pressing. He needs a lot of aggressive players. So not only in center backs and fullbacks and midfielders and attackers, he wants them all to be very, very proactive. That's why I'm not saying we're complaining, but we're saying, how is Ronaldo going to fit? How is De Gea going to fit? How is whoever is passive in our squad is going to fit? Because they don't really like to do the things that Ten Hag like to do. And you'd have to change them fundamentally, which I keep saying that it's very difficult to try to change a player's habits and fundamentals completely to suit the style that you want to play. So that's why, the transfer market, happens. I don't think he will go to a 3 at the back. I think it's just the way he builds up anyway will make it more. He'll try to emphasize more that the midfielders build for us by dropping, or a fullback, maybe Dalot, maybe Shaw, tucking in, into beside the centre backs and building up that way.
Interesting question, then, guys. Do you think there's a viewpoint from a goalkeeper that they prefer a 3 at the back, or they prefer 2? It's a question that as a centre half, I've always wondered what a goalkeeper would prefer. Do they feel more comfortable with 3 centre halves in front of them, or a bit more vulnerable with 2? It's quite interesting, really. It's a thought pattern I've had for a while.
So for me, playing in goal, I don't think it really makes a difference to the centre halves, I find, unless they're constantly getting out of position. So the times I've felt odd at 3 at the back is in England through academies and through university football. Very few teams play 3 at the back. So if we ever did switch to that, a lot of my players wouldn't really, the outside centre halves wouldn't really know exactly how far to go out or how tight to stay. And sometimes that made it difficult. But other than that, there was no real issue there. It was more with the fullbacks and my starting position for crosses. So when I've got a 4, there'll always be a fullback on the winger, basically. So my starting position for crosses will be sort of very standard. Depending on where the ball is, I'll be basically, if the ball's 6 yards past the 18-yard box, I'll be like on the penalty spot. If it moves back, I'll be further, and then I'll be eventually, if it's right at the byline, I'll be like 2 yards off my line. But when I don't have a fullback there, normally, if the wing back's gone up and there's an overlapping player down and the centre half is sort of stuck in two minds of whether to go out or whether to stay, that can often be very difficult judging exactly where I need to be. Because if that winger runs in and makes it tries to make it a one-on-one, I need to be in a position to rush out and sweep up or rush out and attack the one-on-one. But I still can't be too aggressive, because if they clip the cross over my head, I might be in a world of pain if there's a striker coming onto the other end of it. So that was the only difference I found. But I imagine it was probably mainly driven, like I said at the start, by centre-backs in England, at least, not being that comfortable with 3 at the back. So getting out of position more often than they would. Let's say if I'd grown up in Italy and played in goal in Italy, I imagine their centre-backs are much more used to playing 3, so I wouldn't have faced the same problems.
Yeah, so one of the things that we speak about then, and I do now want to touch on the fullbacks and the importance of the fullbacks from a goalkeeping point of view. Me and Abdel have spoken about this again on many occasions. I'm an old school meeting 2 veg kind of guy, 4-4-2. That's where I grew up. You know, I started playing football late 70s, throughout the 80s, 90s, and I'm still playing today for my sins. And I still prefer a fullback to be a fullback. So I prefer a fullback to be on hand, to show the winger down the line. You were talking about the attacking the diagonal, which is what fullbacks allow the wingers to do at the minute. If they attack the diagonal at the box, it's an absolute nightmare for a goalkeeper. It really is, because they can just upend and twist a fullback inside out by that, because the fullback's completely on the back foot, and it's difficult then for you to sort your defence out if the fullback isn't showing him down the line. If he shows him down the line, it's then easy for you to get your centre halves into play. Make sure your left back or your right back, whichever is attacking, is tucked in, and then you've got a nice little screen in front of you. When they're attacking the diagonal, as you pointed out, what do? Do you stay on your line? Do you rush out? Do you go 9 yards? It's very, very difficult. So looking at our 2 fullbacks, guys, and Abdel's spoken about this before, and John, I'd love your input on this. Have we got the right personnel at fullback to be able to cope with the way that Ten Hag wants to play? And do you think the fullbacks, as well as the centre-halves, have been culpable in the exposure that De Gea is getting as well? Because they have attacked our fullbacks easy. Our fullbacks are out of position on a regular basis. And so I'm wondering what you guys think about that, and how Ten Hag can, get rid of that, really freeze the fullbacks to an extent. If you are out of position, you've got to get back. Because as you well know, and Abdel has spoken about this all the time, we don't have the midfielders that can come around and cover, and we don't have the midfielders to take the ball off the fullbacks at a more deeper area. So it's a bit of a long-winded question, but I think you get what I'm getting at, guys. So whoever, please.
Okay, I'll go for this one. I'll say that now that we got Eriksen, we have Donny, we have Bruno, let's assume we get Frankie de Jong. All of these midfielders, they're good possession midfielders / creative midfielders, right? None of them are more of the aggressive, physical, recycle the ball and keep possession within your team type of midfielders. So that makes it very hard to have a cover if the fullbacks are way high up and keeping the width. So by that token, for someone like Delal, does he have the recovery pace and the defensive instincts to go back, or at least not stay too high up so that he can cover that? Because your midfielders are going to go up, right? Because they're attacking in nature. And the same going to be on the opposite side. Like Luke Shaw wants to attack. Most of his good attributes are attacking wise. He's not bad defensively, much better than Alex Telles for sure. But the problem is, when he gets caught up high, it's very hard for him to recover. So when you don't have a midfield that can cover for him, then it becomes a problem. So United at the moment feel like they're too attacking, for their own good. And that's why, like last season, they were conceding a lot of counterattacks horribly, because the midfield are not really cover midfielders, and the fullbacks are not really I don't want to say defensive fullbacks, but they're attack minded too. So we had most of the season we had Alex Telles and we had Diogo Dalot playing, right? And these two get caught all the time, right? And at the same time we have Bruno, and we sometimes had Donny, we had Fred. And Fred, if you just give him the hint that he can go forward, he will take it all day, and we will go forward up into the penalty box. Then basically the structure you have behind is 2 center backs and the supposed deepest midfielder, which is Scott McTominay, right? And he have a positioning problem as well. So if we're really being honest, you only have your 2 center backs at the back as a cover structure, and that's a problem, especially when the center back is Harry Maguire, who does not have the pace. So, and only Varane or Lindelof are playing with him. And then you realize that David De Gea is the one who's behinding them or anchoring them. Then it becomes even worse. So I know also this is a long-winded answer, but like basically, depending on the structure of your midfield, the profile of the fullbacks gets sorted, basically. So, and because all the options now are attacking midfielders or midfielders who like to go forward, I don't think our fullbacks should be attacking. They should be either put in midfield or stay just relatively above that halfway line.
That's exactly what I think. How do you remedy that then as a goalkeeper from your eyes? How do you remedy that? What Abdel's just said.
Well, I guess my first point is, so often as a goalkeeper, the communication you're doing is actually, so midfielders and fullbacks are very, very similar in the role they play because they're constantly covering for each other. And that's sort of what Guardiola has done with his like inverted fullbacks thing. So as a goalkeeper, I'm often telling my holding midfielder, when my fullback's gone up, you've got to drop in there. You've got to drop in there. And you've got to be a bit of a pessimist. It's like he's pushed forwards, you come in there and then you can receive a pass and act as the fullback and play it across the U at the back. Or if he loses it, you're just the fullback then. So it's one of those things that, exactly as Abdul was saying, the centre mids have to be pessimists and be aware of what's going on when the fullbacks are out of position and have pushed forwards. And yeah, if you've got effectively 4 creative midfielders packed into your midfield and you've got certain players with positional problems, you're always going to get caught out in those areas because teams in the Premier League are good enough. If they see that space in the fullback area, they can put a ball in there. And I think a great example of a team that does this well is Liverpool. Like Robertson and Alexander-Arnold are constantly up the pitch, but Fabinho and Thiago are really, really good at not getting overexcited. The reason Trent and Robertson's assist numbers are so high isn't just because they're so good. It's because that's the system. And they've got a system where the midfielders, Thiago and Fabinho, don't want to even try and get involved in assists. But they let the fullbacks go, and then they effectively become fullbacks. Like if someone from like the 1960s watched a Liverpool game, they would probably more often than not think that the actual fullbacks were the centre midfielders because of what they do in possession of the sort of covering.
And the 70s, John. Honestly,
the 70s, yeah.
And early 80s, 60s, 70s and early 80s, you're absolutely right. I'm not saying it was a rigid formation, but it is. And you know as well as I do. Sorry to just butt in for 1 minute, but when you're in a defensive mode, you're either you're defending in a 4-4-2 or a 4-5-1, aren't you? So your fullbacks should be square on with your centre halves. You talk brilliantly about a U. I call it a smile, don't I, Abdel? I talk about the 2 centre halves deep and the 2 fullbacks slightly up, but halfway between the byline, so to speak, and the edge of the area, so they're positioned perfectly for an attack down the wings to show them where they need to show them. So you talk wonderfully about the U, and Abdel uses that analogy as well for when he's talking about centre midfields taking the ball. So you're absolutely right. It gets completely forgotten just how essential the likes of Thiago and Fabinho in particular is with his position. And when you watch Fabinho play, he wanders around. And people look and think he's wandering around aimlessly, but he isn't. He's just watching the play.
Even Henderson and
Sorry to put
John,
it,
Gini Wijnaldum, when they had him, they were doing all these same tasks. The reason why Liverpool collapsed the season before last isn't because they just lost Van Dijk. It's because they lost all their centre backs and they had those covering midfielders play centre back.
Centre back, yeah. Fabinho and Henderson played centre back.
It's that they lost their midfield. It's not that they lost their centre backs. You know, if Liverpool had any average 2 centre backs playing there and put their midfield back where it belongs, the system functions back as normal. And that's why they got good at the very end of the season, because they played Nat Phillips and some other centre back, but they got back their midfield. They got back Fabinho where he plays. They got back Henderson where he usually plays. So the collapse came from removing the midfield or the attributes of the midfield and putting them in centre backs and leaving that midfield not doing proper cover work for them. And this is where they got countered on and lost to Everton and lost to these 6 on the bounce at home, because they keep getting caught on the counter attack. So the thing that people don't realize with Robertson and Trent is that they're effectively playing as wingers, and what people and the ones who are covering for them is the entire midfield. Like John was just saying, like out of all the list of midfielders that Liverpool have, Naby Keita and Thiago Alcantara are creative in nature, but even those two try to control them not to go too high up. You know, the other midfielders, all of them, they're not goal threat midfielders. They're midfielders who just keep possession, keep it tidy, recycle, win tackles, intercept, break play, those type of midfielders. And that's why it works.
I agree. Yeah, no. So sorry, John, I didn't mean to,
it's all good.
The point you're making was something that me and Abdel have spoken about on a few occasions, and it's we always get told, well, that's not quite right and all this kind of stuff. So it was nice to have a little bit of vindication there from a goalkeeper. Just one final question then, guys. And I'm sorry to go back over it, but we talk about then the Martinez Maguire relationship. How do you see that kind of melding together? Because I'm forever told that the ideal centre-back pairing is a left foot and a right footer. Well, it's absolute rubbish. It just isn't. The ideal centre-back pairing is 2 people that understand each other and offer different attributes. Have got different attributes and offer different things to the game. Also, great communication between the goalkeeper behind you and your centre midfielder in between, in front of you. So what you were talking about, John, was how I was brought up to play football, how I understand the game, because I played centre midfield as well as centre half. So just to finish off with then, guys, I'd just be interested to see how you guys think the Martinez and Maguire partnership could operate, and is it the best partnership, I guess, really?
I think for me personally, answering that question, I'd have to see how much Martinez can adapt, because from what I've seen, he's a bit of he's going to be a sort of ball playing centre back if he's played centre back. If he isn't played at the sort of number 4 at the base, let's assume he is going to be played centre back for now. My one worry would be, are him and Maguire going to both want to attack the ball? Is no one going to end up sweeping? Are they often going to get caught where they both want to win? Because they're both quite eager when the ball's in the air to win it. And that was one of the nice things about the Varane-Maguire partnership. Obviously, injury problems and fitness problems curtailed that really getting set in stone. But the nice thing about that was Varane is naturally wanting to drop off and he's naturally wanting to cover, whereas Maguire was going to attack the ball. So that is one area I do I'm a little concerned about. But I think on the ball in build-up, they should have a brilliant partnership, and it should allow Maguire, if he goes back to the right side, it should allow his passing to become more effective. Because at the moment, Maguire on the left, he's still a great passer, but he dribbles through and then plays like a through ball. He doesn't do the sort of long raking ones, but I think if he gets shifted to the right, he'll be able to do those long raking ones. And so I think they'll both be really good in build-up, as the sort of short answer. But I do worry a little bit about when balls are going over the top, who's going to drop off, who's going to go forwards. And that's like exactly like you said, Stu, that's just communication. Like 2 guys who love winning headers, that doesn't mean they can't play together. It just means they've got to be really good at when they communicate. Like in an ideal world, you'd have two centre backs who are the best ball players, best in the air, quick, and really good. But you can't always get that. But just because they both have the similar strengths in certain areas, I think if the communication's there, that's perfect.
Totally agree. Abdel, final word from yourself, old friend.
Well, I can't really, add much to what John
He summed it up, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He said all there is or needed to be said. Really, like for me, I think that for the funniest part, at one point last season, we saw that Varane became the aggressor and Maguire was the one who was sweeping behind him, and I completely got baffled by that. But that was the original plan, like John was saying, is that Varane, because he's passive in nature, would be sweeping, and Maguire not. And thank you for saying that Maguire should be playing on the right side as a right centre back. I've been saying that since last year. I was like, Maguire would do us more good playing on the right than being on the left centre back. I know his dribbling ability is one of the best in the league. Like, he's one of the best centre backs, carrying the ball and moving out. But opening the passing lane, especially in a build-up structure, would be a lot better. Would be a lot better for us than him just carrying the ball on his own through the press. So yeah, that's one thing I'm excited and I'm happy Ten Hag did, to be honest, is moved him to the right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I'll wrap up now then, guys. It's been absolutely, this hour's flown by. It's been absolutely terrific. Again, John, you've been magnificent, pal. We've never had a real insight from a goalkeeper on the tactical preview before, and it's been great because although me and Abdel can't understand the tactical side, I understand the defensive side. Trying to really articulate it from the eyes of a goalkeeper has been very, very difficult for us because we're not goalkeepers. So it's been an absolute pleasure, John. I hope you've enjoyed it.
No, I've loved it. Thank you very much for having me on.
It was nice to meet you.
Where can people find you, John?
Lovely to meet you guys too. Yeah, so at JHDHarrison1 on Twitter. I do most of my social stuff on there. And I've just recently joined goalkeeper.com as their head of data science. So on the website, literally as simple as www.goalkeeper.com, there'll be loads of articles and things, and they'll share all my tweets and stuff like that. So if you want to see analysis of De Gea and Man United in general throughout the Premier League season, starting in 10 days, I guess now, it'll all be there, so people can check that out if they want. And
just before I go to Abdul, will you come back? Maybe 3 or 4 games into the season, we've seen how we'll be doing tactical preview once a week. We'll probably go live actually during the season. So if you'd love to come, we'd love to have you back on.
No, 100%. And I assume there'll be lots of talking points. I remember at the start of last season there was lots of goalkeeping and De Gea related talking points. So yeah, I'll be very happy to come back on and we can go through some matches.
That's brilliant. Yeah. And Abdel, where can people find you, old friend?
Yeah, same thing on Twitter, Abdel Beheri. That's my Twitter handle. You know me. I post a lot of articles and tactical threads on Manchester United mainly. I try to diverse a little bit whenever I can. But yeah, that's it.
Guys, that's been your tactical defensive analysis show tonight. Thank you to my guests once again. It's been absolutely brilliant. Please like and subscribe to the channel. The more of you like and subscribe, the more great content and great guests like John and Abdel we can continue to have on. So thank you again, and see you next time. Take care, guys.